We continue our studies of Exodus today by considering chapter 2, verses 1 to 10. The situation described at the end of the previous chapter was desperate indeed for the Israelites. They stood in imminent danger of extinction. The god king of Egypt and the Nile god were ready to use all their power and resources to eliminate the people of God once and for all. More seriously still, the very promises of God were under threat. How could such disaster be averted? Perhaps surprisingly, the answer begins to unfold as we're introduced to a domestic scene in the family of one of the obscure and hated Israelite slaves. Most of us are never likely to become great leaders of God's people. As a result of this, we tend to think that it's not so important for us to be faithful to God or trust Him. After all, what difference can our obedience or even disobedience make to the purposes of God? But the Bible does not allow us to think like this. It describes in the book of Ruth the faithfulness of a humble farmer, Boaz, and his wife Ruth, in a small village community in Palestine. They became great-grandparents of David, who was one of the two greatest leaders of Israel. Moreover, David himself was an ancestor of the coming Saviour of the world. What worldwide blessing sprang from the obedience of Boaz and Ruth? A similar situation is described in the early verses of Exodus chapter 2. In the face of great disaster, we're introduced to Amram and Jochebed. Their names are given in chapter 6 verse 20, but are omitted here probably to emphasize their obscurity. But at the time of Pharaoh's decree, Jochebed had a son. Perhaps the fact that she recognized him to be a fine child suggests that she suspected that this helpless baby would one day have a great role to play. Certainly it suggests that she was looking for God to fulfill his promises. She obeyed Pharaoh, but entrusted her little child to the God who had made the Nile. It's possible that she deliberately left the child near a place where it was known that Pharaoh's daughter bathed, and this might explain why the little boy's sister was stationed nearby to watch. If so, their faith was rewarded, and rewarded very soon. Pharaoh's daughter found and adopted the child and entrusted the baby to its mother as a nurse. The name given to the child, Moses, must have increased Jochebed's hopes. She would have seen in his name, which means drawn out, not only a reference to how he was found, but also encouragement to believe that he would draw out the people of God from Egypt and lead them to the land of promise. The story which follows shows very clearly the results of Jochebed's faith. Moses, we will see, did become the one Israelite to equal David in the history of Israel. What a challenge this is then, to be faithful where we are. We're not told exactly when Pharaoh's cruelty ended. It's been suggested that the compassion of the princess was shared by others, and this persuaded Pharaoh to change his policy. Possibly Moses' deliverance was seen as a rejection by the Nile god of such cruel practices. Certainly we can see this story as describing the victory of the Nile's creator over the river's claim to deity. A victory which, as we shall see, will shortly be won once again. Here then we see God at work, silently at first equipping Moses with those skills and abilities which will later be required of him, and will help make him the great deliverer of God's people. It will nevertheless be nearly 80 years before God is ready to act. God's timescale is rarely ours, and we can often be deceived into thinking that he is inactive, even unconcerned. Yet God is working all the time, unseen by us. And these verses remind us of this great truth, which so often lies behind our present trials and difficulties.